Hi everyone, this is Debbie Henderson from Debbie's Designs. Today I'm going to show you a project featuring a technique called the Tarnished Foil Technique. And if I hold it up, you'll see that there's gold and silver embossing powder over some silver foil sheets. So I'm going to show you how to do this. It's pretty simple, even though it looks complicated. Let me get you a list of supplies you're going to need today. For cardstock, we're using the silver foil sheets measuring 5 by 3 3/4, Bermuda Bay cardstock 5 1/4 by 4. For the card base, we're using basic black 11 by 4 1/4 and scored at 5 1/2 in the center. And I have some pieces that I pre-cut just to save time. With Whisper White cardstock, I cut out this little squiggly shape from the Swirly Scribbles Thinlits dies. And for the bold butterfly, that comes from the Bold Butterfly Framelits, and we're going to need 1 butterfly with Whisper White cardstock. The gold foil sheet butterfly was cut with this butterfly from the Butterfly Thinlits dies. And I've used the stitch-shaped dies to cut a circle, and then I snipped off a little piece on the end. That's about 3/4 of an inch. And then I pre-stamped the sentiment, and I'm going to show you how I got the a straight sentiment to stamp curvy the way you see it here. The stamp set that we are using is Big on Birthdays. And I'm using the one that says It's Your Day. And what I did is I took my circle, I'll flip it upside down so I can show you, and you see that this is a straight stamp. So what I did is I laid it over my circle, and then I just shaped it this way, and you got to press down really hard for it to stay that way. And I just kept moving it so that it was in the shape of my circle, as you can see here, and then that's how I got it to stamp in the curvy shape that you see. And continuing on with the supplies, we need the Fluttering embossing folder. It's the one with all the butterflies. Versamark ink, StazOn ink, and I've got my bone folder, the Tombow multi-purpose glue, the snail. And lastly, you're going to need copper embossing powder, gold embossing powder, and a heat tool. So let me clear my surface so we can get going on our project for today. Now I've just brought in my Big Shot machine, and the first thing we're going to do is place the silver foil inside the embossing folder. And one little trick to remember, if you notice on my card, the butterflies are bumpy side up. In order to achieve that, make sure the logo is sitting on the top when you run it through your Big Shot. So we're going to run that through. And now you'll see how pretty this is, embossed as is. Isn't that gorgeous? But we're going to add our magic to it. So now we're going to bring in the StazOn ink, and I'm going to add a piece of scrap paper underneath. And what you're going to do is swipe over the bumps so that you get some black in there. And don't worry if it looks like this. It's got lines going through it. Most of that is going to be covered with the embossing powder. So I'm just going to keep going here. And I'm picking up the wings going this way. So now I'm going to turn it this way and do the same thing. Okay, and that should be enough. So this is what our panel looks like. And I'm going to actually set this aside to dry a little bit, and I'm going to pause the video because I don't want to add embossing powder over this ink while it's still wet. Okay, I have let this dry about 5 minutes, And the reason is because StazOn ink can be tacky sometimes, and I didn't want it to grab the embossing folder. So now I'm going to bring in my Versamark ink, and I'm just going to kind of tap over the bumps. You can't see where you're getting the ink because of the glossy paper, but you'll notice that once you start adding the powder. See how much I have on there? We're going to do the gold first, and then we're going to add the copper. So it's actually 2 layers on some of it. And don't worry if you get some of the powder on the outside of the butterflies, because that does add a little bit of interest to your project. So now I'm going to bring in the heat tool. And I did not press extremely hard when I was adding the Versamark, because you do want some blank areas. So now I'm going to heat this up, and I'll fast forward the video so you don't have to watch me through this whole thing. Okay, so now we have the gold that is all heated, and as you can see, there's some blank spots in the butterflies, and that's okay. And this did curve a little bit, but once I'm done, I'm going to heat it on the back side, and you'll see that that will disappear. We're going to bring in the Versamark ink one more time, and we're going to add just a little bit here and there. Some of it will overlap the gold, but that's okay. And now we're going to sprinkle the copper. If you notice that there may be some in there that's a little too thick, I usually use a paintbrush and I just kind of rub some of it off. So I don't want to cover the whole butterfly. I want some of the silver to peek out. Okay, now we're going to heat this layer, and again I'm going to heat it up and fast forward. We've only got one more step remaining, and now we're going to again use the StazOn ink, and this time you're just going to try to highlight some of the embossing by rubbing it like we did in the first step. I'm not going to add as much as I did in the first step, but as you can see, I'm adding more detail to the butterflies. So I'm going to turn it over this way. And then I'm also going to do the edges of my layer. Okay, and you can see here, I'll do a close-up of some of the butterflies where the black actually highlighted the tips of the wings. So all we have left to do now is to assemble all of the card layers. So I'm going to fold my basic black in half. Glue down the Bermuda Bay layer. And if you are a demonstrator who holds classes, this would be a great class to have with your students. Now I'm going to glue this because it's still a little warped. I'm going to use Tombow multi-purpose glue, just so I'll be sure that this won't become unglued. It would be quite embarrassing to give this card to somebody and then the embossed layer would come off. Okay, and I'm just going to turn this over so I can flatten it. And now all we have left to do is to glue the die cut elements. And again, because we're gluing on embossing, I'm going to use the multi-purpose glue. And this is going to be a little too long, so we'll have to trim it. And I'm going to make it so that it's even with the embossed layer. Press that in place. And then I'm just going to take my paper snips and just snip those even. The next step is to add our stitch shape. And this one I'm putting it in place even with the Bermuda Bay edge. And then we'll add our 2 butterflies. And for the gold one, I'm just adding glue in the center of the body. And I'm actually going to fold his wings. Just hold that for a couple seconds. And there's our finished card. As you can see, the embossing is different on both of them because none of these will ever come out the same. It's pretty neat how this the copper and the gold act on the silver embossing. If you have any questions, make sure you leave me a message on YouTube, or you can email me or blog me. I'll have all of the supplies listed at the end of my video, and I hope you enjoyed my technique today. Thanks for stopping by.